Good morning. This is the Board of County Commissioners 2024 through 2025 biennium budget deliberations. It is Monday, October 23rd, 2023, and it is 9:22 a.m. We are at 3000 Pacific Avenue, room 110. This is a hybrid meeting, and for public virtual attendance, you may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. We have a couple of things we're going to be discussing today. There's going to be the clerk budget presentation, forecast update, and review of office department budget request. Before that, I'll move into presentations. I'm Carolina Mejia. I'm the chair of the board, and the boardroom is Vice Chair Ty Menser, as well as Commissioner Gary Edwards. We also have interim county manager Robin Campbell, as well as assistant county manager Rob Gelger, and we have our budget team joining us. And Nicole, anything you would like to add before we get started?
Yes, Commissioner, thank you. Good morning. Good morning, Chair of the Board and Commissioners. We're here today to discuss the 2024-2025 biennium. We will pick up with the clerk's budget presentations. This is a continuation of the last 2 weeks where we went through all the offices and departments presentations related to building the new biennium. Today is just informational, so we will continue to share information concerning the budget. No decisions will be made today, and so that's all I have.
I do need to make an announcement before we begin regarding our technology in this room. Apparently, there is we got our new encoder, but our internet connector is too slow for it. So we are going to be streaming these meetings, but we are also recording the meetings so that if the technology for streaming does not work for any reason, the recordings will be posted in their entirety and people will be able to go back and view them once they're posted. So I'll be making this announcement every morning until we get a new internet connector box. So tech, the beauty of technology.
How much time will elapse between the meeting and a posting? Like a day?
We normally get them up by the next day.
Oh, okay.
So we get them right up. All right, so with that, we're gonna turn it over to our clerk.
Perfect. Okay, clerk, go ahead.
Great. Thank you, commissioners. I also want to thank Robin for getting us scheduled onto this work session. I'm going to go directly into the effects that the proposed staff reductions will have on the clerk. First off, there will be a less access to justice for the public. What that means is, as we look at the effects on our budget, I will be forced to decrease my hours of operation. This limits the public's access to filing their cases, viewing their documents, and also filing documents. This will also limit protection order victims' time to get to the court and request their protection orders. We have them lined up first thing in the morning, 8 o'clock, pretty much every day. And these people need assistance right away. I foresee that we will have a lack of staff for court hearings. We're already seeing that there are times when I don't have enough staff to get to the court because of either not enough staff hired at the time or staff calling out sick. The court will need to reduce or cancel trials or hearings as a result of this. Also, we'll have a delay in documents getting to the file. Currently, we have a standard of entry of documents within 24 hours. We've been very successful at even decreasing that standard to less than 12 hours from filing to when those documents get into the file so that the court can access them. Also, the statute requires that judgments that get ordered by the court be entered in the system by the next court business day. If they're not entered timely, there could be a monetary liability on the county. So as a result of also those documents not being in the file, the court would be unable to prepare for their trials and hearings. Staff would be pressured to do more as a result of the pressure to enter court documents, and thus, as a result of that, there are more errors. Schedules don't get done properly. Many different things happen when staff is under pressure to get more done. The second area that we're worried about is the loss of criminal jurisdiction in LFO cases. So if the clerk takes a payment in a criminal case where we have lost criminal jurisdiction on the legal financial obligation, it could be a liability to the clerk and the county, because we'd be accepting money that we should not be. So if staff doesn't have time to monitor those cases to ensure that payment should not be received. So as a result of those potential risks, there could be a lawsuit filed alleging that we took money that we did not have the authority to receive. The third area, which we feel could be affected by the loss of staff, is in the child support state and federal grant reduction and reimbursements. Those reimbursements are calculated on our current payroll, and as a result of reduction in staff, that would be a potential effect. We looked at, I want to go over stats a little bit, although as the pandemic hit in 2019, our figures were pretty stable, but then the pandemic happened, and so pleadings, cases, hearings held decreased considerably as a result of that period. So when we looked at, what's going on now, we compared last year to this year, same time period, January through the end of September. In the pleadings filed area, there was an increase of 12,000 pleadings over that same time period. In cases filed, there was a 1,200 new case filing for the same time period, and proceedings held increased 2,300. So, given the pandemic, I didn't feel it was beneficial to look at 2019, but at least to focus on, we see the trend in all of those areas that affect the clerk. So at this time, I would entertain any questions the board may have for me.
Questions?
Is there, on the end by the next day, is that governed by an RCW? Our court order?
The judgment, yes, that is a statute.
That's an RCW.
I can get you that statute if you like.
That's good. That's it.
I guess I'm asking about because as we've tracked along post-COVID with recruitment, retention, labor market, I don't have the numbers, but I have a sense that your department, your office has been more hit by vacancies. I mean, not periodically, and you've always been struggling. So I guess I'm wondering how that plays into this whole, because you're saying, well, levels, we make a certain cut, level service is going to drop precipitously. That's what I heard from this morning. And I didn't understand the long-term effects of putting critical vacant positions, but I'm just wondering how other offices have come in and said, we just got a little staff. So, I know, so, that would be a different, if we're actually, dealing with that. So how do you see that issue, where your vacancies are, and what level of cut that's proposed would dovetail with that?
Well, currently we've struggled, as I said to you many times during our meetings, to draw qualified applicants. Recently, we were seeing a trend being able to hire and actually we're doing better. And then the news came of the reductions, which I've felt like I needed to back off. It's been hard. It's been over 2 years that we've been going through this. And there have been many times where I've had to say to the court, there's a potential I won't have enough staff to come to court. These reductions will just make that worse.
How many vacancies do you have at this second?
I have, help me out here.
We have 4 as it stands right now. By next Thursday, we'll have a total of 6.
4 now, 6, a couple more coming.
Yep.
Yes.
And to speak to that, we have lost due to low pay to the state, the city, Pierce County. All of our positions that have employees that have resigned have been due to higher pay, with the exception of 2 who had personal family reasons for moving out of the area.
So would you say that the most important thing to you is a salary increase for the employees?
I think that would help, absolutely. And I've also seen the morale go down. They're very frustrated. The staff, productivity has gone down, the accuracy has gone down. I mean, when you don't feel valued, I see them reacting.
You've had, if I remember, like, so 4 or 6, whether it's 4 or 6, I feel like you've had like up to 11-ish vacancies. I'm guessing one of my questions, you've had at least that many vacancies, right, for the last year or 2?
4 to 5.
But there was 4 of them were Blake.
At one point, it was up to 18, and I have the statistics for that. So happy to share those.
And if I may jump in, as of August 30th, I have a vacancy report from HR saying 14.
As of what?
August 30th, so about 2 months ago. 14.
No.
Unless 5 of those are those
Unless you're
project
counting-
positions that we just never filled because they're for Blake.
And what, and like kind of worst case scenario on a cut reduction proposal, how many FTE positions are you saying that you might have to eliminate in order to meet the target that you were provided?
I don't know that yet.
The clerk's target is 396,000.
How much? 396.
96.
Okay,
Thank you.
yeah, one other question, Madam Chair, and then I'll pass to you. The
Okay.
second issue, you talked about the loss of criminal jurisdiction, and I didn't quite understand
So-
what that is.
So when the law, help, Brian
So
can explain this.
when their judgment comes down from the courts, you have so many years to be able to collect on that judgment. And then we have the ability to extend that judgment for another set amount of years. So it's 10 years plus another 10 years. Well, back in 2000, they changed the law to where we never lost jurisdiction. So anything after July of 2000, we retained jurisdiction until those judgments were all paid off. Well, recently on the 1st, they changed the law. So now, restitution, we have indefinite jurisdiction, so we can get it until they pay it off. But non-restitution, legal financial obligations, they placed the jurisdiction back in place of 10 years, but they did it retroactively. So all of a sudden, we just lost jurisdiction on all of these cases that we had indefinite jurisdiction on. So now we have to go through all the cases and try to figure out which ones can we collect or can't we collect. And then that's a huge undertaking because that's tens of thousands of cases.
What's your strategy for trying to do that? Retroactivity is always a nightmare to.
Pulling reports and
Pull in reports and
doing it when we can.
our staff has time to work on, I mean, it's a matter of staff time.
Madam Chair, those are my questions.
Thank you. I'm glad that the clerk has met with you, Commissioner Munster. This is the first time I'm hearing from the clerk this whole year. And so I have not been hearing that. I've just been looking at the vacancy rates and the job postings online and seeing all these vacancies specifically from this office. And I've had past employees reach out, right? And I'm just trying to address the comment in regards to the low pay. One of the other things I've heard is leaving because of the work environment. And I'm wondering, right, like, is there any plans to address that? As commissioners, one of our things that we're trying to address is the pay gap. But if we're still going to be seeing that rotating door, I'm not sure if this is, even with the cut, if it's really going to address the issues that you have in your office, Clerk Enlow.
I'm not sure how I want to respond to that. That is not something that I hear. So obviously you're hearing something that I'm not privy to.
Madam Chair, I've got a question.
Go ahead, sir, and then I'll come back with the rest of my questions.
By any chance, this would be to Robin, would that be an unfunded mandate when the state changes the law and puts new requirements on an individually elected office? And could we look into that?
We could certainly look into that. If the changes in the law limit the time in which we can collect money from judgments, then I'm not sure how that would be seen as an unfunded mandate. Going through and determining which cases those are on the collections, I can see where that would be a workload impact. But
Kind of like
I
Blake.
don't know that it'd be an unfunded mandate.
It is like Blake.
I mean, Blake, they didn't get to the legislature recognized it would be an unfunded mandate and they funded it. But, I mean, because I think they knew there would be a huge pushback. This is kind of akin to that. I mean, a retroactive law that requires, that's what Blake's all about. We got to go back through all these judgments and figure out who's eligible and create court dockets to, to go to proceed.
But on Blake, we had to vacate the judgment, repay the people. On this, is it the same or is it just
We gotta go.
not collect from now
But
on?
we still gotta satisfy the judgments. So
sorry.
we gotta satisfy the judgments. So we basically, when we go through the cases, figure out if we lost jurisdiction, then what we do is we go and we satisfy that judgment if we lost that
And
jurisdiction.
what does that mean, satisfy the
That
judgment?
means that it takes a lien off of them, off their property or anything.
Okay, but you don't need to go back to the judge. You don't need a prosecutor and a
we-
defense attorney to determine.
We got a determination from our representation saying that we have the ability to write those off by what the law says.
Right,
So we can make that determination once that jurisdiction is lost.
right. And if we collected something that was beyond the 10 years in the past, we don't have to pay that back.
No, it depends on when we collect it. So if we collect it after we lost jurisdiction, yes. And if it was
we
collected
need-
on so there's how the law is written is that jurisdiction starts on the day the judgment is placed or when the defendant leaves total confinement. So if they get a sentence of 2 years in prison, once they come out, which it might be sooner than 2 years, so we
Sure.
gotta go through all, try to figure out when they get out, that judgment starts that
That
day they
day.
leave. So then we have to start calculating the 10 years.
Right,
And then so from there, we'll figure out, okay, say like October 20th of this year, we lost jurisdiction. So from that point going forward, if we don't write off those fees and we collect on them, that liability is on us.
so, but the whole thing is prospective.
Yeah.
Yeah,
In this sense, yes.
it's not like
So as we have time
It is
to,
a workload.
right, as we
It's a
have time
workload,
to
yes.
get those entered and that satisfaction is in the case, then if the defendant comes in to make a payment, it'll show there's nothing owing. So that takes away that liability.
Right. I can see a temporary staffing to do the review, but
The problem is, it's not like there's a Bureau of Unfunded Mandate, you just call up and, you know, I
Right.
mean, if they don't recognize what you're talking about, you're looking at going to court and
Right.
there's gotta be quite a bit of money on the table.
And I just want to
Right.
point out another thing. So we used to have a collection program, and they were the ones that would
Oversee.
run these reports and look over the cases and make sure that we had jurisdiction. A year and a half ago, the ledge took away our ability to assess collection fees.
right.
So now our collection program's gone because we have no way to fund it. So now we don't have anybody to monitor these cases, be able to help restitution victims get their restitution anymore. We don't have a program to enforce
Board of
this.
County Commissioners did not take your FTEs away when that
No, well,
funding
we
dried
had,
up. So where did the people go that were doing that?
we actually moved our one collection officer into another position because the fund wouldn't have supported it. Because we don't have the ability to assess those collection fees anymore.
Did the board eliminate the FTE? Or did you
No,
just
not yet.
shift the work?
We haven't been really doing the work.
No.
We don't have staff to do it right now. That's our biggest issue.
The FTE is still sitting on the books, and
Yes,
when
yeah.
we talked about the financial plan, that it doesn't support it, we had the conversation about if it needs to be put in and officially abolished by the board.
So we were still bringing in collection fees that were assessed before they changed the law, because it wasn't retrospective saying that we get all the collection fees waived. So we still have some coming in, it's
Not much.
Perfect. Thank you. I want to bring up, Clerk Enlow, your rate of reversions throughout the year. And this is knowing that COVID was an anomaly. There were, of course, just different situations happening, but from looking at here, since before, right, you've been returning around 5%, 7.4 in 2017, and it's kind of gone around that percentage of reversion rate since that date. So can you walk us through that, right? And we're seeing that those reversion rates and kind of since that date, and again, ignoring those COVID years just because of the anomalies for those ones. But it's been high, and so I'm just wanting to give you the opportunity to kind of talk through that and,
I'm not clear where you're going. I'm just,
well, no, I'm seeing here that you're reverting in 2017, 7.4% was reverted. And so it's gone, 5.87. So I'm just wondering, you have these high reversion rates. Can you explain that? Is it like, what you're reverting? Is it store savings specifically reverting?
I'm not clear what you're asking for. I'm sorry.
Okay,
So the year you have unspent budget. Why?
We have to go back all those years. Then. Absolutely.
okay, that was my question. And so just give me the opportunity since it's been, right, and just give me the opportunity on what is it like, what is it throughout these years that has cost those?
Well, I'm it's been difficult to process. We have postings for months on end, and we do not get qualified applicants. So we sit waiting and waiting and waiting. And then we have one position, one application that we interview. Maybe they're not suitable to hire. There's been many different reasons.
So does that include the project positions for Blake?
Yeah, it just includes basically
So
all
you
of the
gotta remember
reversion
too,
rates.
we had, we got approved for 5 project positions and we really only filled one of them, so that's gonna play into that. That we were never, we figured out what our workload was, therefore we only had to fill one. So you're gonna have a savings of those project positions too that are gonna play into this, so you gotta take that into account.
Thank you for explaining that.
Commissioner, we have a request out to HR to help us look at what is Blake and what is not, so that can be a little bit more clear.
That'll give you a better idea of kind of where it was.
Perfect, thank you. Let's see, those are really my questions. I have one more question in regards to request, and maybe just to give you some time to prepare when you're addressing it. The auditor mentioned that, you know, she's also facing this cut. She's going to be relying on that fund as well. So it might not be something she supports on an ongoing basis just because of the impact it's going to have on her office. And so maybe once you get to that point of addressing,
I can address that.
just how it's going to, if this is not supported by that fund, how it's going to impact that position. What is there a plan that you have?
If that's not funded, if the auditor has already met with me and shared with me that given the budget reductions, that she may have to pull that approval of the audit position out of the maintenance and operation budget. I will just let that employee go. What that means is I will no longer be able to audit paperwork. My goal has been to clear out the vault, get rid of these records so that when we move into building 1, I am able to have a smaller size of vault, which I think would help the county in terms of the cost to renovate that building. I have records. I still have paper files that we're trying to get rid of. And I cannot get rid of them until they're audited to ensure that every document is preserved forever in the file. And that's a statute that requires the clerk to keep the records forever.
Thank you. And can you go into, just for people watching this, when you're talking about auditing, like what is specifically that you're trying to do and what this position does?
So as I stated, every document that gets filed in the Superior Court file has to be digitized and preserved forever per statute. What this audit person does is take and view every image based on the physical document to ensure that it's in the system digitized.
Any additional questions?
At this point, I think I've heard that it's, the 8% would be 390,000 or something like that.
396.
So on your vacancies right now, it's just gonna add to it? Is that what that problem would create by not funding you to the full amount that you need? Baseline, you know, we're talking about cutting your baseline $400,000 basically. And that adds up to what, 7 or 8?
4 to 6 employees, correct? Depending on the level that I choose to reduce.
Right.
But you've had, I mean, my whole point is you've had 4 to 6 or a lot more vacancies for the last several years. So why, I mean, you've been struggling from the beginning. I don't see that this is going to actually cause level of service to drop so precipitously. You haven't had thhave people.
We've had to pull in management to help get work done. I can't continue in this mode. There's no way for me to continue like this.
She's had managers have to go to court.
It's managers are going to court. They're not able to do their job.
Well, that's what we needed. That's what I need to hear.
What I've proposed is if I was to be truly reduced and continue down the road of doing the work that I can continue to do, which is I can't expect my managers to cover constantly. It's too much of a heartache.
So where you're having a hard time recruiting, it'd even be that much harder, right?
Absolutely.
So not only would your working conditions be worse, I guess, but your ability to retain, recruit, the whole thing suffers.
And I've had a level of standard to ensure that the court had documents they need timely so that they can conduct court, prepare for those court hearings. And, you know, when you have that standard and then you are forced to make this kind of a cut, I just don't see us being able to survive under this pressure. It's been hard.
I just want to add some. So we've been able to cover a lot of these flaws because, for example, Edison and Linda, every night they go and work queues because staff can't get to the queues. So they're doing extra work. Managers are doing extra work to kind of mask what's going on, to make so we can get documents on time, so we don't get in trouble, that we can do what we can to serve the public. So if we get cut, now we got to continue to do it and we can't even do our own jobs. So that's what we're looking at. Yeah, we're doing it in the short time to keep us afloat, but we can't do this long term. There's just no way.
I've never seen it quite like this in my whole tenure, even back when I was a chief deputy. I've never done the level of work that I've done to maintain and keep this office going properly, the way it should be. And everything that I do is mandated. I wanted to, had I had a little bit more time, I would have prepared all of the statutes that require, everything that I do is required by statute. It's quite a list. It was, back when I did it in 1993, it was 15 pages long of just listing of RCWs and local court rules, state court rules, et cetera.
And don't worry, we've heard from every other elected official as well on how their work is mandated by RCW. So those are the decisions that we're going to be facing on and seeing how this is going to impact everyone. Okay.
Oh, I just have one more comment.
Go ahead.
I wanted to go on record and say that I'm in support of John Thunheim's request to look at a one-year budget to see if we can weather this storm. I'm in support of that.
Would you be in support of it if the cut were to be greater later on? Because with budgeting practice, right, you can kick the down the road and we can say, okay, we're going to do a one-year budget and then the cut is not going to be 8%, but it's going to be 16 to 20%
Next year.
So would that be easier for you?
I would have to look at that more closely, but
So
when you say it that way, no, it doesn't look like it would be any better.
And what do you think we would gain by a one-year budget?
Seeing what the economy's gonna do. I don't know. I
We
just,
could do that with a biennial budget.
when John proposed that, he's very good at explaining what he meant, and I was very supportive of that, so I just wanted to.
But even he didn't articulate what a one-year budget would gain us. So
I understand that.
I'm just curious what you think it would get us.
Buy us more time to see if it improves.
We've
We
got
don't know for sure.
time with a 2-year budget.
Yeah, but once we cut those positions, we don't get them back,
Yeah.
right?
So what you're actually proposing is no cut for 24.
Well, so.
Or
That's
less
what
cut.
I'm trying to
So we're just, well, I
understand.
guess we're just trying to figure out is, from the email that we saw, that revenues are flat. But there was this one-time funding that masked what was going on, if I'm mistaken, is that correct? That there was sometime, I don't know, your email
Yeah.
said there was this one-time funding that masked inflation.
The ARPA funding, COVID funding that came through.
So we're just trying to figure out, you're asking all these departments to make these cuts, but you're saying that if we delay it, then we're gonna make a bigger cut. Well, what safety nets were put in place, you knowing that this money was gonna run out, knowing that this funding was, what safety nets were put in place by the county to make sure this never happened?
So the one-time funding isn't the issue. The issue is the rising costs with revenue going down.
So cost of revenues going down, but we're spending our money where?
I mean,
We're-
let's go back to 2015 when the clerk had that big issue where funding, right, we were facing around how many dollars in cuts just because of a simple accounting error. And we were able to scrape through the HR funding that we had in order for us to do that. And that's kind of what we're trying to do now, is we're trying to see where we have funding, but we let everyone know, prepare yourself. And I remember that email that came from Ramiro at that time in 2015, right? There was this issue with the clerk's accounting. Please prepare for this percentage cut. And it was the same email that I sent out, is we want everyone to prepare. And I think from all of our standpoint, we've been very clear since the beginning of the year. Revenue is tight. Like, we are seeing those numbers come down. We're seeing inflation impact us at a great level. But we've also been hearing on the other sides of compensation, and we're trying to address different areas where we're being impacted at this time.
I want to try to address your question because it's important, but it's when you have this flush of one-time money, but all the requests coming to you are ongoing expense, you sort of have this, you have to sort of balance that. I mean, you have to figure out, I mean, you can spend a little bit of it for something ongoing, but that we look at a forecast that looks out like, 5, 7, 10 years. So you're constantly monitoring. Every time you choose to spend one-time money on an ongoing expense, you see the long-term effect of that and through our financial model. And so, we did choose to spend, a certain amount, and each time we would make sure that, the forecast was still in line with a conservative projection of revenue growth, which is about average. We're not, 5% sales tax, for example, is kind of what we usually use, because that's been the average over time. Not in any given year, but over, a longer period, that's been a reasonable thing. Just to look at sales tax, for example. And, we could have, if we were only looking 1 year out, we could have done all sorts of things with that money, but that would have been irresponsible because the money wasn't gonna be there. We knew that. We did a few things that were needs of various offices and departments, in government. And we kind of balanced out that long-term forecast, but that was again based on the growth revenue, the standard growth revenue projection that we use to budget. That has flattened out and inflation hit us because, just the maintenance level of the budget to do everything that you guys are doing, that we're doing, it has risen. And so that has created a gap, and it's really completely divorced from that one-time cash that created the large fund balance, because that was planned for by the board. And we spent what we thought we could get away with spending on that because that needed to be addressed and put back into the community, into the government structure. But there was a mismatch between the type of money that we needed and the type of money that we got. So I hope I explained that somewhat. I mean, it did, and I knew we were gonna come to this day where folks were gonna, because we were hearing it along the way, well, you can, when we would say no to something, it'd be like, but you've got this big fund balance, how can you say no to that? Well, because we're looking at the long-term forecast and we know that the thing that not you, but whoever was asking for was not gonna be sustainable because it was an ongoing expense. So it was frustrating to us, frankly, because we wanted to fund all these ongoing needs, but we had this one-time money, so it was very limited what we could do with that money. And, we did not see inflationary dynamic coming, necessarily, or the flattening revenue. It's kind of counterintuitive to me in a way. I mean, with inflation, you might think, well, geez, at least if nothing else, sales tax got to be up, right? Because prices are higher, but there's obviously a lot of economic dynamics that go into that.
I get that. But also I want to address what you just said about the counting error. First of all, when that happened, what was it? 500,000, but if I remember right, the big problem was there was a $2 million write-off of accounts receivables from another department that caused the biggest problem. So you making it look like it was us, that's not true.
That's the email that we
No,
got
but
back.
I
that-
don't know. That was not
Excuse
true.
me, sir.
That's not
Just-
true. It's not true.
please.
You're trying to make it look like we're the ones that caused
Well,
that.
I think it is. I mean, let's be realistic, and it
It's
is.
not true.
Well, you can say it's true, but we can go
How
back
much
to the
was written
account.
off by another department during that time? Over $2 million. And that was the biggest problem, was that. I'm not gonna say which department, but you know, you're making it seem like we were the cause of the problem.
That was the email that we got, and so, you know,
That's not
I
true.
will stand by that.
I'm surprised that is even being brought
Yeah.
up during this work
That
session.
should
Well,
never
I
been
am
brought up.
just,
Bad.
I'm bringing back because we can go back in history and kind of see how these impacts in revenue, right, have impacted. And it allows everyone to prepare. I mean, that email came out, when that email came out, everyone was like, what do we do? What do we cut? What, I remember the panic. I was an employee at that time and I was panicking as an employee, right? But this is kind of the exercise that we're asking. It wasn't to put you in the spot. It was just simply as,
You bringing that up right now is putting the clerk on the spot. You're doing that on
was-
purpose, Carolina. You weren't even commissioner at the time.
I already
So
said I
I'm
wasn't commissioner.
shocked. I'm shocked. So I'm gonna get upset now. This building right here and the money that was spent to get the county into this building and the lease payments that are being paid, I am appalled at what was done to get to this point. This county couldn't afford this building and they shouldn't have done this. And there was only 2 commissioners that voted in support of this. So I'm on record in saying, I do not believe that that was the best decision for the citizens of this county. Thank you very much. Let's go.
You supported the ballot measure for a new courthouse, Linda, based on what? Why was that a good thing to ask the taxpayers to support with a tax increase? Might have been because we had studies showing space needs were absolutely inadequate for what the courts needed and other county departments. But now, I'm hearing a different story. I've heard that in meetings with Linda, and I've had one-on-ones, that's not
That's
news,
something
but I want to let that lie.
about. That's what I mean. Cause that's kind of how a lot of it works. It's what we've been hearing. But I'm just that stuff shouldn't. That was not
Then,
facts.
then
That-
let me
it
go
was
on
not
record,
facts.
let me go on record and apologize then, right? Linda and Lo left. Brian, and Edison, will you sit down again? And let me just apologize. I was not, honestly, it wasn't to, I was just trying to kind of like go back. And this is the only incident that I remember as an employee when working in Thurston County where that happened, right? Where that incident happened, where there was going to be a cut and people had to prepare. So I'm going on the record. Linda has walked out, right? And I'm just going to say, I apologize if this irritated, frustrated you. It was not my intention. I honestly was just trying to, that is my recollection of the last cut that we faced as a county, where an email was sent out asking everyone to prepare for a cut. And so I was just trying to be like, you know, kind of the same thing happened this time. There was an email sent by me saying, prepare for a cut. And this is kind of what the numbers are going to be. So it wasn't meant to throw like any dirt in your office's face. It was not meant to insult any of you. I respect all of you very highly. I respect Clerk Enlow. This was just simply a way to kind of address the different matters that were brought into it. How kind of we landed in this situation?
So now that you're in this position, you need to understand all facts before you start throwing things out. Because as you can see, it can irritate an elected official. And
Well, I am elected as well,
I get
and-
where you're coming from, but again, like Linda said, you weren't in this position when that happened. Therefore, now you are. If you're gonna bring something up, know all the facts around
And
what you're
I
bringing.
do, because I've gone back and I've reviewed what happened back in that date with staff. And I've sat deeply because I was trying to understand like, what happened in that situation back then that got us to that situation where we were facing cuts to like what is going on now. And I've done my homework as an elected, right?
So
but-
it's the way you approach it and the way you conveyed it to Linda
That is,
isn't the right way to do it.
well, that was my approach and
It's the wrong
well-
approach because you just
well,
saw
it
what
might-
happened.
And well, then that's her decision as an elected official to stand up and walk out. So
Know what you're saying.
I do know what I'm saying.
That's all I'm saying.
I do know what I'm saying, and I stand by it. Okay, well, that might be your opinion.
That is. But I don't think you do.
That's fine. At the end of the day, we're gonna be facing here, we're the ones who are gonna be making these decisions. And we have the right to ask you questions. This is what the presentations are about.
You asked
And
us
if
and
you
we
cannot answer them, then,
We
we're
answered
just
your
gonna go
question.
into
We
this.
answered your questions. But
We can agree to disagree because we're going around in circles here. We do not agree.
no, we don't. But in the future, maybe just watch what you say.
I do not have to do that.
You don't have to, but I'm just saying now.
Okay,
Let's go ahead. We're done.
So before the recordings, I would like to state that regarding the atrium, the county spent $10 million from REIT that could not be in any way used to address this budget shortfall. So the money that was spent from REIT would not have been available. And the money that we're spending on rent, the offices and departments that moved into this building would have been payments into building reserve that we're no longer making. So it's, while it's not quite a wash, it is not a significant increase in the difference between the building reserve payments and rent from general. For the record.
Thank you.
And that concludes the meeting with the clerk.
Perfect. Thank you.
So let's take a recess. And I would suggest until 10:30 that we would reconvene.
Perfect. Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, we are back. It is 10:35 and Nicole?
So Nicole Martinez, Budget and Fiscal Manager. So we're gonna jump into budget deliberations. This will be an entire week, Monday through Friday, where the commissioners are gonna look at all the change requests that were put in by the department, by line item, asking any questions, any follow-ups from presentations. The budget office is prepared to answer those. And before we actually get into the line items, we're gonna jump into the forecast update. So we'd like to share with you with what's going on with our revenues and our expenses. So I'm going to share my screen and address that. So presentation mode. There we go. So the agenda this week will be, we already today talked to the clerk, and now we're gonna go into the forecast update and the review of office and department budget request. Tomorrow, we'll dive into the public safety sales tax, diversity and equity council, and then again on continuing up on budget requests. On Wednesday, we'll talk about personnel and the budget request. Also, joint animal services will come to be able to speak, and we'll go back into budget change request again. On Thursday, we'll go into the 2022-2023 Amendment 4. This will be final deliberations. Last week, we met on the first review of those change requests, and so we'll finalize those. We'll get into pool cart rates. We'll have central services, IT, and as well as the sheriff's office come and speak to us about the jail camera project. We'll get into IT budget request. And then we'll focus on the review of department and budget requests one last time on Thursday before jumping into Friday and having final decisions that will be placed in our preliminary one budget, which will be posted November 20th.
And if we, do we have overflow? Is that like drop dead date for these?
That is the drop dead
That is
date
the
this
date.
Friday. That's it.
When you say dropped it for overflow, did I hear you say?
Well, I was talking about, I started to ask, is there an overflow time if we fail to get our decision making done? Do we come in Saturday? Do we come in Monday? And
Saturday would be the thing.
I'm just,
We would clear.
for Saturday.
yeah, don't
yeah.
make plans for Saturday.
No, so if we're not done by the time we, leave on Friday, then what I would do is look at the calendar for Monday and just clear it so that we could continue. Because staff must post the budget book no later than November 21st. And to do that, it has to be available like the Thursday of the week before that. And they will only have 2 weeks to get the book ready. So by
Okay.
law, we have to have it done, and you need to make the decision so that we're able to do that.
Let me have a question on that issue. So what's the difference between our requirements by law and just, I'll use the clerk, who's the most recent elected official that's been here. Their requirements by law as to certain accomplishments, I guess, what is the difference there? Does it lead to some kind of an audit finding which is worse? In this case, maybe there's liability finding with the clerk. So how does that work out?
So mandates, I don't disagree with anyone who's come forward and says that what they're doing is mandated by state law. Everything a county does, the county is an extension of the state, doing local work. So everything we do has to be authorized by state law. Somewhere in state law, just about every single thing we do, there's some underlying authority. So everyone's coming forward and telling you that what they do is in state law. Yes, it is. Is there a penalty attached to every one of those things? No, there is not. And that's the part that we've tried to analyze in, I think it was 2018. We tried to look at what of the things are we do have a penalty attached. Now, I don't know, the clerk was laying out for you what some of the downside is if she doesn't accomplish what she's mandated to do by state law. I couldn't tell you what all of the various mandates and penalties are. What I can tell you is if we don't accomplish these specific steps in the budget, we won't have a legal budget. And if we can't pass a legal budget by the end of this year, county government will shut down effective January 1 with no path forward. That's the downside of these requirements that we're laying out for you.
Okay, that's pretty serious.
Yeah, nobody could operate. So we have to be on time with the publications. We have to hold the public hearings on specific dates. You have to pass the final budget no later than December 31st, or much like Congress. Yeah, no appropriation.
Okay, just curious.
All right. Okay, so we're gonna get into the forecast. We're gonna first start with sales tax. Again, we're gonna look into the general fund. The major revenue sources in the general fund are sales tax and property tax. That is why we have those two when we start talking about revenue forecast in the general fund. So to get into sales tax, we have numbers as of September. The sales tax revenue in September was 2.3 million. It is about 4.5% compared to September 2022, so that's our year-over-year growth. The year-over-year growth from 2023 is 2.5%. And so we've been building into the forecast around 2.3, 2.4 we've been seeing, and it's been steady. So the numbers that we've been providing to you are steady. As far as sales tax, we have not adjusted the forecast. We find that this will be how the year will most likely end at this rate, and so we're gonna stay steady there. And that's basically what this is showing, that there has been no major change in our revenue and our sales tax. And so the next slide is just another depiction of that. This is the actual dollars. And this slide just shows the categories that are impacted by sales tax here. And so one of the major categories in our sales tax is retail trade and construction. And retail trade makes up about 41% of the sales tax that comes into the county, and construction takes up about 23%. And between those two, we see that they're pretty flat. So you see retail trade is, the percent over year is 2%, and whereas construction is 1%. So these are your two major driving forces within our sales tax. And this is just to express even further that the sales tax is holding steady by what we have built into the forecast. Okay, so property tax. So property tax for 2023, the practice for budgeting is to budget higher than what we think the property tax will come in. We do not see any changes in our property tax that we will continue to collect in 2023. The trend is consistent. And so we are not adjusting any of our revenues when it comes to property tax as well. So as far as 2023 is concerned, when it comes to the general fund and our revenues, our sales tax is consistent with what we've been projecting, and our property tax as well is consistent. So now I'm gonna jump into property tax calculations for 2024. So this is, she speaks to how property tax is calculated. We are able to do 1% over the highest levy amount to determine what our property tax will be. And so you can see here that this is an additional 400, a little under 450,000 there. Also, we are able to include in new construction. This new construction number, since we've been presenting this information to the board, has held steady at this amount. We have not seen a huge change here, and that's increasing another $721,000 there. The assessed property value here, this has to do with our utilities. We still have not received information, updated information from the assessor yet, if there's any growth in our utilities that we're collecting, so we are forecasting a zero growth here.
Even when we get that number, it's not going to result in a lot of additional property tax. A levy increase, it's absolutely gonna be less than 100,000, it's probably gonna be closer to 30.
That's right. And for budget purposes, we budget more than what we intend will happen when we're doing this calculation to make sure that when we do get more concrete numbers, that we have incorporated all the revenue that is possible for the county to collect. And so that is taken into account already.
It's already factored into the forecast.
Yes.
So let me ask you something on that, is it okay? So when we do our 1%, what is that gonna amount to in dollars?
1% results in
474.
$449. Yeah, roughly $450,000 is the 1%,
Yeah, okay.
which doesn't cover.
What was the one that you said was, it's really gonna be 30,000?
That is under the state assessed property line,
Okay.
when we're able to fill in the amount of the state.
Oh, where that's
assessed
blank right
property,
there?
Yep.
So that is likely to be around 30,000?
The amount
you're
that
saying?
we add to the levy is probably gonna be somewhere in the $30,000 range.
So this column over here is gonna
Yeah.
go up by 30,000?
Yeah, which is
Okay.
nothing.
No, right, okay, but I'm just,
That's just an estimate.
but our
we're not
1%
sure.
that oftentimes I'm debating about,
Right.
in the past, so that's gonna be 450,000.
Right.
And we sorely need it.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so
need
I just
the
wanna
whole thing.
make sure I get that down right.
Yeah. There are other counties that have not done the full 1%, but not many of them, and
Well, weren't
But
we in
we
a
need
situation
it.
one time when we had enough income, we only did half or something?
No.
of one? Did we do something like that, or it was
not in,
proposed? or-
not since I've been
Okay.
here.
Okay,
We've done the full 1% every
okay,
year.
okay.
And the only other thing to add here to the property tax is this additional 474,000, and that's from the refunds. This was much larger than in the past, and so that has impacted how much revenue we think we'll get in this year. And so that's a benefit there to the county to be able to collect that in the next year.
Well, and when you say it's not usually that, what would it usually be? I mean, in different, and why is the difference?
So it's normally less than 100,000 that we do in refunds. And we don't know, the treasurer sets the refunds. He has not told us why it's so high this year. Usually it's because there's a large property that qualifies for some type of refund, but we don't know.
When you say refund,
Refund. So a taxpayer, if you believe that you should get a credit, or for some reason your property tax was set too high, you go to the treasurer and the treasurer can authorize a refund. And all those refunds collected last year or handed out last year to citizens, the treasurer tracks those. And then at this time of year, they send us a letter that says refunds for each of the types of property tax were this much. And what the county, because the county levy is not set on property values, it's this, setting of a number with a 1% new construction. We get to add refunds back into the levy in the following year so that we can collect the money that we anticipated. And the amount of refund could be somewhere in the 20,000 range. You see this here, it's almost $500,000. It just depends on who comes forward and what refunds are eligible.
and that's That's a cash inflow into the county's budget.
It's not cash, it is an addition to the levy. It is an increase in the revenue that we anticipate next year. But as Nicole said, when we calculated the levy early this year, in the summer, we did a calculation using certain assumptions, and then I round up. Because what the law says is that the levy that the county is allowed to collect cannot exceed the amount in the preliminary budget. So I estimate how much it's gonna be after all these things come in and we get the facts. And so far, the amount coming in is tracking pretty close, and my estimate that I rounded up to is still more than what we've got. So basically, what the message is the forecast is not changing just because we know these new numbers. We already put the levy that we're anticipating into the budget, just like we have in other years. So when you look at this, we're always, every time we give you this, we're gonna be under collecting the levy because we have to round up just in case something comes in unexpected right at the end of the year.
So you'd have authority to spend it.
So we have authority to collect it.
Because if we don't, then we don't.
That's right.
I was afraid you were gonna say that you'd have to subtract it because, it wasn't actually a legitimate levy if it had to refund it, you know what I
Oh,
mean?
no.
It could go the other way,
Right.
right?
If the board does not certify the levy timely, when you're asking about mandates and what the penalties are, there is a state law that says the board must certify the levy. The county has until December 15th to certify the levy, and if you don't do that, then you don't get any of this new money, and the most we could collect is last year's levy. So there are penalties that come with not doing a timely budget.
Okay, so with that said, then with the total assessed value, we're looking at 81 cents.
So it's going up
Great.
from 80 to 81?
It's 0.8075.
It had been 78,
Yeah,
it's
so now it's gonna go
now
up to
gonna
the
be 80, which is a little bit counterintuitive because usually when property values go up, the levy rate goes down. But this year it's going up slightly.
Because of the refunds, I would imagine.
Could be the
Throwing it
refunds.
off. Okay, so this gets us to our general fund projection. This projection has not changed from the last time that we met. I just want to bring it to retention again. As far as our beginning fund balance, we did project that it would start about 41.5 million with the revenues that we're collecting at being a little under 118,000 there. Million, excuse me. Our expenditures are estimated at 126 million, just about, with an ending fund balance of 33.6 million. So we're anticipating in the general fund to start the 2024 budget with 33.5 or $33.6 million. And so that's a decrease from our 41.5 million that we started the year. And this was our planned reduction of our general fund balance to be able to spend it on services that we needed throughout the year. So that's what's projected.
Is the expenditure being lower than projected based on revised reversion estimates from departments?
That is correct. So as of the end of August, we got information from the departments through August that was submitted in September. And so this is revised reversions as of that date. So still around 4%.
So that hasn't changed from the
Has
last time
not
we saw
changed.
it?
Right. Has
It
not
just
changed.
changed from when we passed the budget?
Right. That is correct. So,
The changes have been so minor that basically we're, as far as this year goes, we're still in the same position that we have been for months now.
yeah, so the budget office has continuously, we're looking at the revenues, we're looking at the expenses, we're trying to monitor to make sure that we have the right numbers for when we start 2024, and that we're budgeting the correct numbers in 2024 to assist with the services that need to continue.
Can we go back to page 8, or just a couple pages back? Property tax calculation. Add road levy shift, $2 million. All right. Is that road levy, or is it diversion?
It's the levy shift. $2 million had been the planned amount for the levy shift, and that is part of what you'll be talking about this week, is how much do you really want to set the levy shift to be? But we had planned on 2 million, that's the levy shift, that is in addition to the 1.5 million in road diversion.
Okay. Did we do a $2 million road levy shift 2 years ago or last year?
This year, the levy shift was 2,250,000. Last year, it was 2.5 million. The year before that, it was 2,750,000. So we have been slowly stepping it down.
And for how long have we been doing that? Have we been doing that over the last 8 or 10 years?
No.
Since you've been here?
2020.
Oh, we've been doing so there's a long history, as you know, of the moving funds from the road fund to the general fund.
Diversion, I mean, long
Well,
history.
we were doing diversion when I got to the county in 2010. There was already a substantial amount of diversion. That amount went up. I would have to look back at my records to see exactly when and how high it got. But as you know, we had a disagreement with the County Road Administration Board, or CRAB. CRAB passed new WACs. A WAC is Washington Administrative Code. So they established new WACs that restricted how counties can use funds that are diverted. So we reduced our diversion down to 1.5 million to be spent only on road safety practices by sheriff deputies in the unincorporated county. That's what qualifies. And we started doing the levy shift, and I forget how long ago that was, but I think at the peak, I want to say at the peak, we were at 4.5 million combined between the levy shift and the road diversion. But I'd have to check that number.
So what would have been this calculated, I don't know how to refer this 7 or 0.77 or 0.78 or
The-
0.078, something like that. And now we're up to we're over 8, like almost to 8.1. So wasn't that calculation changing all the way through? So it might have been down to 62
Could you-
at some point, and it's been
There's the
fluctuating
rate
the other
right
way.
there. The rate is in your packet.
It's in the packet here?
Yes.
Okay.
And as you can see, the rate has, for the most part, been going down pretty steadily. When property values go up and the levy is capped at the 1% plus new construction, then the rate will go down. That's why I said, I'm surprised it's going up this year, because usually it would have dropped again.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure that difference out.
Right, and looking 2001 is when the 1% cap went into place. At that time, our levy rate was almost, it was $1.78 roughly, per thousand of value. And it has steadily decreased, and that's the impact of the 1% cap. That is because we are capped at increasing our
Right.
levy.
But why,
Property
how come the change from 23 to 24, or I don't know, is it actually, so it's going down every year, everywhere there, I think,
Except for in 24.
except for 24, and why?
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out why
I don't know,
that
I'd have to
is.
look. Look
2012,
at
what does that
the
mean?
growth. The growth in value. I'm losing my shoe. So if you look here, the growth in value has been like in the $3 to $4 million range. And then there was a huge jump
Yeah.
between 21 and 22, and look at the drop in the rate.
Right,
And then a big jump from 22 to 23, and look at the big
Massive
drop. And here, once again, we see something that's almost
Yeah.
flat.
right,
It's flat, and we do our calculation of the levy, so it has now gone up just a
Yes, a little
tad.
bit, yeah.
And if you look, in years that the property value goes down, here, between 2010 and 2011,
Yeah,
the rate goes up. So it's almost like a mirror. And I think that the reason we see it go up here, and I'm just speculating because I haven't spent any time looking at this, is because this is flat. This still went up, and so the rate rose slightly. The other thing I want to tell you about this, though, is that our maximum levy rate for the general fund is $1.80. So we basically
yeah, we were
have.
almost there, up there.
We were, when the 1% cap went into place, we were collecting close to the maximum amount we could for the general fund. And now we have levy capacity, is what it's called, between the current rate and the maximum of almost $1.
But we have to go to the voters to
We
get
do
that,
have
and
to
that
go to the
takes,
voters.
what I've been complaining about for years is trust,
Right.
before we'll get them to vote for it. So I'm just trying to figure out now, and maybe this isn't the time to have the discussion, but I've raised this with my seatmates about the ability to do road maintenance under today's environment, where the material that we need to do that road maintenance, I don't know, one number that Bruce or somebody used the other day was 70%. I don't know if it's all 70%, but it's at least 60% more today than it was 2 years ago. And so we're gonna get less than half of the road maintenance accomplished if we spent the same amount of money. And so what I'm advocating for is, does it make sense to spend that same amount of money, get half the road accomplishment done? Or would we be better off doing the shift? And if that's coming up later, maybe that's a different conversation or at a later date to have, but I wanna make sure I don't miss the opportunity.
We absolutely have set up to have the conversation with you about the levy shift.
Okay. Okay.
So we spoke about the ending fund balance, or the beginning 2024 fund balance being around 33.6 million. And so this is the slide for that. The next two slides just go into the expenses per department. So the budget versus expenses. This information was presented from the departments. We collected from them. This is based on their estimates on what they think they will spend in 2023.
Now there, it leads me to another question, and that is, on the clerk, we were talking about some different reversion figure, but here it's talking about maybe 11.5%.
That's right.
So is that to do with the
Vacancy.
FTE vacancies? And
It's a combination of the vacancy savings and the amount that we're not spending on Blake.
Right. So we got information.
when we're not spending on Blake, but do we have the revenue if we needed to spend it on Blake, or do we have to send money back?
We get reimbursed for expenditures for Blake.
Right.
Pardon?
We're
What was that,
reimbursed
Jennifer?
100%.
We get reimbursed for Blake expenditures.
For 100% of the
Uh-huh.
expenses.
Yep, if they were to spend money on
Okay,
Blake.
so
we'd
what
get
is the
money.
difference if it wasn't for Blake?
It's the
What
vacancy
number?
savings.
Then it would be,
Vacancy savings.
yeah, but what would it be? It'd still be 9%.
If they spent all the money they could on Blake, then they'd still be reverting a significant
Yeah,
amount.
9% or so. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just guessing off the top of my
So,
head.
So I can't tell you the percent, but I can tell you that as of today, they have 10 vacant positions, 4 are Blake. And so the other 6 are just vacant. I know as of August 30th, they had 14 vacancies, so I would attribute to most of this being because of vacancy savings as Robin is speaking to. So it's not really in supplies or services, it's mainly in vacancies.
Well, I mean, it's probably over in community planning and economic development. They've also had a problem hiring, you know, I guess, and retention and stuff. So they've got a pretty good reversion amount there as well. I'm just trying to figure out if we make this 8% reduction, are we gonna be able to do it without laying off too many people? I guess that's where my concern is.
well, that would be dependent on what the offices and departments bring you. And I will say, as you know, we requested that they enter their proposals into our budget system so that we would know what those proposals were. All of the departments and 2 of the offices did so. And the rest of the offices, the ones that entered the information were the treasurer and district court. Did any others come in? So the rest did not. So they have not provided what their preferences would be. Should you have to cut those offices, then we'll do our best to identify vacancies for you. But they've not told us what they'd prefer. Other than, I'm gonna amend that. They have told us, first, of course, they would prefer that you not do a cut this year. Second, they have said, just tell us how much and we'll manage it later. But in a budget, we have to identify where the money is gonna come from or where it goes, so. And many of them suggested they would take it through vacancy savings, which are not as sustainable or reliable, and we are already counting on reversions, which generally come from vacancy savings, so you've already taken that into account.
Can I ask a question on that? Right, when we're not funding certain positions, I'm wondering, the classification stays there, correct? So let's say if revenue is about to, does a 180 flip and we're seeing like over $10 million and what we didn't see, right? We're seeing just this increase.
Yeah.
And so at that time, right, those positions could be added back on if
Absolutely.
they wouldn't have to go through this whole classification process and this.
Absolutely not. The classifications, we have classifications that have no authorized positions. So the classifications stay, it's just the position isn't authorized. So we could put into this budget an assumption or a proviso, something to the effect of last out, first in, where in the midterm, that would be the first thing that we would present to you is here are the things, revenue's so much better than anyone ever thought it was going to be. Here are the positions that were eliminated, put them back in before we look at anything else. We could do that.
Okay, well, then I'm wondering, based on that, that's a what if things get better?
Yep.
But why wouldn't it be more beneficial to put a hiring freeze in place so that we didn't have to jump through all the hoops of creating new FTE positions? We could just, as a board, and we've done this somewhere in the past, where why couldn't we just have that in place so that we could, at a meeting, we could come in, well,
Right.
this elected office needs this, and this to make this work. Things have changed. It looks like that would work and we could authorize it rather than create a whole new bureaucracy of creating new FTEs. So I'm just wondering.
Right? No, that's a good question. So let's talk about a hiring freeze and how that might work, because it's been a while since the county tried doing one of those. Under a hiring freeze, there's a few different ways to go about it. And the first thing you could do, when people think about a hiring freeze, what they think about is, okay, no one can fill any vacant position, period.
Well, that's one way. We could have
Well,
exceptions built
but no,
in.
but this is where I'm going.
Okay.
So you start with nobody can fill anything. Well, the first thing that happens is a totally essential position that you've got to have to make your business run is vacant. So someone will come to you for an exception.
Yep.
That means we have to set up an exception process. And what we've seen is, and this is normal in a hiring freeze, the vacancies, the positions that you can do without are not necessarily the ones that are vacant. So people will come to you about the vacancies and say, we absolutely have to fill them. And in my experience, because the county for like, I think it was like the first 3 years that I was here in the county, and then we've done them off and on in the state for years, there've never been savings. In the 3 years where the county had a freeze in place, there was not a single office or department that was told no, they couldn't fill a position when they identified and requested a variance. Basically, there were no positions that didn't get filled. There were zero savings from the hiring freeze. And the board, when I believe it was, I know Commissioner Blake was on the board, and I thought it was Commissioners Edwards and Hushings when we told elected officials that they did not have to go through the process anymore. It might have been the board before the one that you were on, Commissioner Edwards.
I think it changed.
I think it did. So then elected officials didn't have to request any longer, and it was just the departments that had to have permission to
That's right.
fill.
That's right.
And then, just last year, it was so, I'm gonna say, it was so pointless that I looked at Romero and said, do you and I, well, a few years ago, it stopped coming to the board at all, even the departments. The authority to fill was given to Romero. And he and I reviewed everyone, and I looked at him and I said, why are we doing this? We're not telling anybody no. Nobody's been told no in 13 years. So we stopped reviewing them.
I
If
guess.
you'd like to do a freeze and you really want to save money, it's got to be a hard freeze with no exceptions. And I've never seen that done anywhere.
And then with the hard freeze, right, I mean, seeing all the different right, all the different vacancies listed right now on our, on our website, I'm just wondering, how does that really save us money in the long run, right? Does it really get
Places
us?
where we need it.
Well, we're gonna have to accommodate growth as time goes on. I mean, it's just, it's part of life. And whether or not that's the reason all those requests were granted, I don't know the answer to that, but the economy was generally getting better at the same time that
Right.
those were all answered. So if the economy is not getting better, I guess the answer is gonna have to be no, except for those situations where, for an example, half of the position is funded by a grant. And we
Right.
have to fund the other half. And if we don't fund it, we don't get the grant.
Right.
So some of that type of thing takes place. I just see that, yes, if you said yes, there had to be a reason you said yes, or the board said yes. So I believe during that stretch of time, inflation was flat and revenue was picking up during that period.
If you look at the records, I mean, this packet had the sales tax. One of the interesting things about the sales tax graph is this one. You see how flat it was in those years, super flat.
But still very slightly, Clement, very slightly.
Very, very slightly,
Yeah.
just like here, very, very slight
Right.
growth now. We're not seeing negative growth like we did back. How far back does this go? This doesn't go back far enough. In the years of the Great Recession, there was negative growth.
Yes.
We haven't seen that. We saw it be very flat for a long time, then some pretty significant growth, which we benefited from, and now it's flattening out again. And so when the growth that we had is increased, the property tax that comes in. We've had robust new construction, but even that lift in the levy. So when we look at the amount of the levy, how much, go to the, there we go. So 1.6 million in the growth of the levy. When we add the new construction, the 1% and the refund.
Yeah, well, and the refund really throws me off because I still can't figure out the why.
Well,
And that's
Well,
hard to
we'll talk to the
quantify a
treasurer.
positive.
Well, it's not, it won't be calculated next year. It's a year-to-year thing. But the growth in the levy was $2 million, no, 1.5 million. And the amount that we're gonna pay out for the COLA next year is 1.9 million. So the growth in the levy plus the very flat growth in sales tax barely covers or doesn't cover
Doesn't even
the
cover
amount of the COLA.
Right.
And
That's
that
where the
doesn't
shift comes in.
begin to cover maintenance level and the must-do policy items. And that's what puts us, in a nutshell, for anyone who's listening, it's the flat revenue compared to the increasing costs have gotten us to a place where we have to tighten our belts.
I'm not arguing that.
Commissioner Munson?
So I need to go back to the, what you were saying about the cut. So I thought I had asked you or the team that, like, let's just take Superior Court. If they didn't want to present their package of cuts and we were just to say, okay, Superior Court budget is 8% less than it was last year. but you're saying I thought we could do that, although it's, but you're saying this morning we can't do that? We have to be more, we have to identify what's getting less money? We have to go
Yes.
in and be more surgical than that?
We have to identify where the money's coming from in the budget system because we don't enter into our system office and department. We enter office, department, and object. So, sorry for the accounting speak. So it's fund, department, object. And an object is the type of money you're spending. So, salaries, benefits, goods and services, indirect are the basic high-level, breakdown. We need to know where to take that money from. And if we're taking it from salaries and benefits, our positions are fully funded. That is a policy of the county. We fully fund all positions so that offices and departments can fill them at will and know that they've got enough appropriation to cover all the positions that they have. So if the only place for us to take the cut is off salaries and benefits, we need to know what positions those are tied to.
Okay, I got,
Vacancy savings is not a thing.
but why do we need to know where those cuts are being made? Why couldn't the court make that determination on their own, following up on what Commissioner Metzer is
We have
saying?
asked the court.
No, no,
You mean
we don't
later?
have to, we don't have to know ahead of time. Give them X, whatever the 8% less is, and they make that determination. I don't think we need to micromanage the budgets in that tight per FTE, which one we decide is more important. The court knows, or the clerk knows,
So
or the
as long as
sheriff
they
knows.
tell us, we'd be fine.
Okay, well, I
But
get
they
that,
won't.
okay, well, that's what I was, cause yeah, maybe they can scrape, 1% out of supplies, or
Yeah,
whatever.
sure.
And maybe,
Yes,
I mean,
and we're
They can
totally
make
open
the
for that.
determination. I think some of this case was decided, and I think it was decided out of court, is when Kimball was sheriff. I don't think it
So,
went to court completely,
It
did it?
did not go to court.
It was a
and
negotiated settlement?
What the result is, we do have court cases that were decided on this topic. The Board of County Commissioners can say what types of positions and how many of each type. What the board cannot say is who is going to be in those positions. The
Okay, well-
elected official and the appointed directors are allowed to choose who to hire to fill the
No,
positions.
there is a big difference, in my estimation, between elected officials and department directors.
I understand that
difference.
is your opinion, sir.
I believe that we can allow the elected officials to have X number of dollars, whatever we have available. Let them figure it out. I don't think it's my job to tell the sheriff, well, you can have a sex offender detective, but you can't have a fraud detective. Whether or not that's my priority.
So I
I
would
think
be,
that what Robin is getting to is we're not, as long as they let us know, because they
Right.
need to input that information to the budget. And if, right now, it's been very minimal, the offices who have let us know exactly what it is, right? And so that's why we've had these presentations, in order for them to come in and let us know, and we've given them this time. And I mean, I don't want to go into the minutia of it,
Nobody does.
and I'm thinking everyone feels that same way. But there has to be a way, right, that all this, because when we're audited, right, like, we have to have that information on exactly what is being funded and what is not being funded.
Well, that is why I wanna do the hiring freeze rather than cut all these positions. As far as just FTE allocations, I think the hiring freeze,
But we're
solves it.
seeing, so like hiring freeze, sorry, I did not mean to interrupt you, sir. Are we going to exempt the 24-hour service, right? Because we're seeing several positions with the sheriffs and corrections and law enforcement, several positions that are open. Like, what is it exactly? And so if we're going to do a hiring freeze, like, for me, I would like to see, is there savings from that? Like, you know?
What I'm trying to say, I may have this wrong, but I'm trying to say that isn't even a hiring freeze another level of micromanaging and control? If you just if we just go department by department and set a numerical target, reduce their budget by that amount, they will figure out if they want to do a hiring freeze or if they want to cut
I agree
people or
with
they
you.
want to do whatever they want to do.
I do agree with you. I think the hiring freeze is a compromise.
When we set the target, we're gonna have to think about the things that Ben Miller Todd brought up, that Patrick O'Connor brought up. We're gonna have to think about it a little deeper to see this, because we have to assess the funding structure vis-à-vis the general fund. But once we do that level of analysis and we set what we think is a fair and appropriate, although not, it's not gonna be pleasant or fun, but when we set a fair and appropriate fund reduction dollar amount, then that's what I'm kind of looking to Robin and Nicole. I mean, is that a way that we then just let them do, then each department, which is so unique, and when I say department, I mean offices, each group, I'll say, each group, which is so unique, has maximum flexibility, is what I'm going for, to reach their target, without the Board of County Commissioners telling them, like Linda said. Linda said, I was like, not gonna be any level of service. You haven't had those if you have to cut 5 employees, you've been 11 vacancies down for 2 years. Well, she's saying, but that's only because we have this unsustainable, everyone's stretched thin. Okay, I accept that at its face. Then maybe she decides it's a different approach in her
Right.
office. Why do we have to try to figure that out on an office by office by office by department by
That,
department
I'm
basis?
with you. I am with you. I have to say, and we're talking about the clerk, so there's a reversion of 610,000 coming up. But she's gonna get cut 400,000. So let her take it out of the reversion, if that's what it amounts to, to set the base budget. And I know our ending fund balance suffers, but at least you have a new baseline. From that point on, you have $400,000 less out of this 5.3, so you're back down to 5 million.
So let's look at the model. I will just add to this. Here is the state law. So the budget is required to be prepared in a comparative and tabular form, estimated expenditures for the ensuing year, and for us, it's a biennium. And we have to show last year, this year, and the next 2 years, in detail. And then.
What does in detail mean? Does that mean down to the pencil?
In detail, we've
paper?
interpreted in detail to be fund, department, and object.
Okay, but you've determined, somebody's determined, you say we,
Well,
you,
we
the
can go
budget
into the
team.
BAR's manual, but the state auditor has determined. And then the law goes on to say in 3640.050, the budget shall be submitted to the Board of County Commissioners, and the board shall thereupon consider the same in detail, making any revisions or additions it deems advisable.
And that's what
So this
Commissioner
puts
Benson
it
and I are saying.
on you
Yeah,
to make changes in detail,
in detail, down to the dollar.
not.
So we're gonna cut
Try not to
8
go to the dollar.
Well, we're gonna cut 8% out of this dollar amount, which is detail enough, I think, and let them figure it out. I do not see that we need to figure everything out. So now that I've kind of got an ally, I'm probably gonna get a little more rambunctious about this. And I'm not saying we're allies, I'm just saying I can see, I mean, maybe we are.
Don't be afraid.
Let's look at all horizons as we move forward on this. And I just do not understand the gyrations that we're going through to get
Can
to
I-
an end result.
Can I ask a question from both commissioners, right, and with the hiring? Seeing that there's some offices and departments who have a higher rate of postings, yet some of them don't have any at all, right? And so when we're
When you
talking
say
about,
postings, like for
like, you
help
know,
Open
for
jobs.
help
open
wanted?
jobs, yeah,
Help wanted?
Assessor said I got none,
yeah,
for example.
but then there's other,
clerk's got
You know.
6.
and so how do we balance that out, right? Some of them are gonna be more impacted, like, for example, the clerk's office will be more impacted than the assessor's office, if that's kind of so I'm just,
What would be, so are you saying
so if,
you'd like to take that into consideration because it'll affect actual people that lose their job?
well,
We should look at their vacancy rate right now?
well,
I mean, I understand that motivation, but I don't know that I could see that as being reasonable. But
so I'm,
like hitting one department harder because they've had a harder
Well,
time filling vacancies.
no, and that's not my suggestion.
Okay.
What I'm wondering is, like, when we're talking about this, I was wondering if that was the suggestion of both you and Commissioner Edwards.
It's not.
No,
Okay,
Not
I'm
me
doing,
either.
I'm
So then
tentatively
how's that?
advocating for the opposite of that,
so,
Yeah,
which is to take vacancies would not be taken into any consideration whatsoever.
they just figure it out.
And it will hit a fully staffed department harder than it'll hit someone that has vacancies that they could use to cut. Now, maybe, let's take the clerk. Maybe the positions that are vacant aren't the ones that she would, like she really needs the ones that are vacant and she'd rather cut someone else.
That's up to her.
Probably not, because, obviously the reality is the ones that are vacant, have been vacant and they've been making do with that and there's not real people involved. And I mean, but theoretically, from a theoretical perspective, we would not be making that determination for the clerk. It would be just like, using the clerk as an example. They might decide to use the vacancies. Okay, let's just use the vacancies. We gotta cut. The only way I can make my target is to eliminate 4 positions. I got 4 vacancies. Those are the ones gone. As Robin pointed out, sometimes it's a critical position that's vacant. You cannot have that be vacant. Like, even though it'd be convenient as a leader of a department to cut that, you can't do that because in 6 months, you're gonna critically need that position.
that's right.
And that just can't be the one that goes.
Okay.
That's up to them. I mean, in my way of thinking, I can't make that decision for them.
I don't wanna make that decision
Well,
for her.
no, like, and I'm in agreement there, yeah. I was just confused on what, I was confused on the proposal, whether it be like, well, it's just gonna be the vacancies that we have posted right now, and those are the ones. And so I was like, well, there's no real fairness really in that, because there's some offices and departments who have more vacancies than others.
So again, we understand that you don't wanna, if an office or department hasn't given you any indication of what is the, best path forward, I'm gonna say, in a reduction situation. We understand that you don't wanna choose it for them, because they're the experts in what they need.
Exactly.
And we absolutely agree with and acknowledge that. What we're saying is we need to know when we put the budget book together, is it coming out of salaries? Is it coming out of, and if it's coming out of salaries, we need to know which positions are going away.
You're saying
So-
because of detail, you need that, but I'm saying you don't need that detail. It just comes out of salaries. Doesn't come from position 1, 2, 3, 4.
If it's not
That's up
coming
to the
from a
individual.
position, then where is it coming from?
No, we
but-
could say out
but-
of positions
So
in general.
if I may continue, before we go down another rabbit hole, what we could do is we could get to Friday where you determine, okay, take for example, the clerk, that instead of 400,000 from the clerk's budget, it's only gonna be 200,000. And you stop there, and then we, to be able to put the book together, go back to the clerk and say, okay, this is the amount now, you tell us where it's coming from. So it's not,
Well, that'd be more interesting to
Saying
me.
that it's gotta be
Okay.
done, it can be done, but it has to be on this
Right.
compressed,
a very compressed timeline. We still work with them and do that, but, and it's still, they would need to step up and do it. They couldn't refuse.
but what about, but I mean, aren't we going to absolutely have to do that with at least some of the groups that didn't even identify what the cuts would be?
Well,
Unless you wanted us to say,
unless we wanted to look, do they have vacancies? Are there vacancies you can eliminate?
I don't
How
think
much
that's-
do they have in goods and services? Is there any capacity there? No, that would fall on you, which is,
For
with all
departments,
due
yes.
respect for other elected officials, in your role as the legislative body, that is your duty to set the budget.
And that's what we're gonna do, is gonna say, you're cut X, that is now your baseline as we move
So-
forward.
If they don't step up and do it, that puts staff in a position of having to choose where those cuts are gonna come
Well,
from.
we'll tell them that's the way it's gonna go then. They better get on the stick.
We don't have that authority.
Well,
You
no,
do by state
I'm
law.
just saying, if we say we're gonna do it, here's your cut, and it's this amount. Now, I am curious about your statement about, okay, we're only gonna do $200,000 cut
So-
to the clerk, that's a 4% cut. So I'm just trying to figure out, what do we actually need to do and create a new baseline? And that goes through 24 and 25, unless we have some extenuating circumstance of the legislature gives us some reprieve,
Right,
I
yep.
guess, on some of the mandate stuff.
Right.
I don't understand why we're trying to go FTE by FTE and trying to make that cut based on their recommendation. Yes, I see that, but I don't think we need to do that. I don't think that needs to be in our purview.
So that's what this week is all about.
I know it is, and it's a waste of time to me. I turned in Jennifer's material that she wanted, and it was, I'm not voting for anything that enhances any of the offices with general fund. I'm told we need an 8% cut. So I'm saying I'm not approving anything that's an enhancement, because the baseline has to change. The baseline has to drop. And then that gives the ability to continue the flow of a reduced budgetary amount a few years out, unless there's a change in revenue. Now, there is gonna be a change in revenue, because you guys have heard me say this before. The world's economy runs on oil. We've got a world war going on right now. It is not gonna be able to, as long as we keep the price of oil high, all our adversaries have the ability to carry on wars. If we decide to produce oil here, cut the oil price down, it cuts all their ability to fund extracurricular activity, which I'm gonna say is wars, because that's how they're doing it. So it's gonna change over the next 2 years. So I think I'm being optimistic, it's gonna get better. I mean, unless everything blows up, and then it doesn't hardly matter one way or the other, but it's got to change. And we can make these incremental adjustments as we go along by knocking the baseline budget down for 24 X amount, whatever that final X amount is. It carries through to 25, the same thing. By 25, you guys are gonna have as you go through 25, you'll certainly, I'm gonna be here. I'm trying to make this as easy as I can for myself as a citizen receiving the services of the county. So I'm hoping that we can make that determination, reduce the baseline and move it across. And that
Reduce it
will solve the problem. X number of dollars, but you
Coming from where?
out of the general fund. Everybody's budget is cut.
Each budget. We
Yeah.
need to know, each budget,
Yeah,
how much it's gonna be cut. And that's what this week's about. Again,
Well, but I've already
so-
made that decision when I turned in my
No,
paperwork.
you
You
really
said
didn't.
you wanted this down. I put it down. We're not gonna fund any enhancements because people are getting along now. Okay, maybe it's not what they like. I granted that. It's not what they like, but it's what they need to do, because I look at this as my budget at the house. I keep the thermostat turned down if I need to keep it turned down, because I don't have enough to pay for energy.
Right.
So, why
So
not?
if I could get a
Okay,
few words in.
jump in here.
The way we're gonna spend this week is looking at what can we do? What can we do, what choices the board has? Because we've been working on what alternatives are there to cutting $7 million out of the budget, and what do you really have to do? And are there other ways to pay for those must-do things? Can we get the must-do things whittled down? All of those questions about what do we really have to pay for? So, while we don't have a final number for you now, this is where we left the graph. This has, an additional $1 million coming in road levy shift. Maybe we could do more of that. We'll look at that. This has, in the review since last we met and looked at the forecast, staff have discovered, things that needed to get corrected, so this includes all the corrections. This includes the, amount that you have authorized, at the bargaining table. So all of this with a reduction gets us down, and this includes the reversion, already used the reversion. So when you mention the clerk reverting 600,000, that's already factored in here, plus a reduction to her office. This gets us right down to a 2-month target, ending fund balance in 2025, and then future years to even meet cash flow needs. We're banking on this turning to the positive growth, beyond what's already assumed in this budget for growth. So this does moderate reductions now with a future that is dependent on robust growth in the county.
Okay, now but you did say earlier, that we're looking at a $7 million shortfall. It sounds to me that you've found some ways around some of that.
We may have some
So
options.
maybe now you're down to 5 million. I don't know. I don't know where we're at, but I kind of would like to know what you're thinking as far as what's the bottom line number we need to
We've got it
reduce
down
from
to
our
4
general.
million.
4 million. Oh, there, thank you.
I'm sorry, can you go back to what you just said?
Can I share my screen
I have a
again?
question that I just wanna ask.
Hang on, and I gotta figure out how to do that. Share.
And then I just want to do a time check really quick. Go ahead, sir.
So, my understanding is the red expenditure, green revenue,
Yes,
we can have
a gap.
an unbalanced budget because our fund balance is way above. But once we start to get into this land where we're below, we can't have an unbalanced budget per our budget resolution policy. So this isn't even a thing that could be. Am I right about
Means
that?
we're gonna have to grapple with it. You're already leaving yourselves some things that you need to grapple in the next 2 years.
Yeah, I just want to point that out for my teammates because we can spend more than we're bringing in because we've got these balances. But when we get down here, we're gonna have to I mean, whether it was prudent or not, we've set that kind of rule for ourselves.
For this
We
year,
can't
yes.
pass a
Yes.
unbalanced budget when we're below our fund target.
That's right.
So even what's up there is not, we're gonna have to be making
Either.
adjustments, cuts, reductions in spending, whatever that looks like.
So this is back to what you heard from the prosecutor. He said that in his opinion, things are gonna turn around. You're banking on it already.
Okay, but it looks like we could change our prediction of reduction, I guess. And that, maybe that could be 5%. You need to come up with a 5% reduction in how you're gonna handle, well, we're gonna actually say then, maybe just all parties concerned that are within the general fund. You're now, okay, we said you were gonna get an 8% reduction. Now we're saying, well, we penciled it down enough. Now we're at 5%.
So we have, while others have been talking about 8%, we've been talking about 7 million.
Yeah,
There's a
7 million.
dollar amount that we
Okay.
need to hit, and staff have, if you agree to certain things, we can get it down to 4.
Okay,
Um,
but
And we've
is
not
that certain
talked about
things,
what those
additional
things are.
shift and all that? Is that part of it?
yes,
See, I don't know to what extent you're calculating that on.
right,
Because we need to come up with a negotiated settlement
that's what
between
this week is
ourselves,
all about.
you know,
That's what
as
this-
to where we're gonna
You
go
got a
with this.
whole week for
But
that.
still, the baseline, all we need to do is say this is what you're getting in 23, and this is what you're getting in 24. Figure it out. I don't think we need to micromanage it all the way down to the FTE. I just don't see it. You know, that's kind of where I'm at.
Well, I'm with you. I'm tentatively with you to a large degree. I do think we need to look at I think in setting that number, it needs an analysis and a discussion amongst us of that particular group, what they presented, what their uniqueness, how much grant stuff they're getting in. I go back to the emergency management presentation. I mean, their number based on a very unique funding structure probably needs to be lower than the 8% or it needs to be, remember I asked the
Yes.
question, I said, some people are telling me that none of this should be considered, and some people that tell me that all of it should be considered, and feels like the truth is somewhere in the middle, and Robin kind of agreed with that. And so we have to kind of, I think,
I don't mind spending the time doing
yeah,
this. I'm
getting to
fine
that
with
point, but then.
I'm not trying to go fishing.
Once we land on that number, then I'm kind of with you. I mean,
Okay.
once we land on that kind of
Okay.
adjusted, well thought out, thoughtful
Okay.
number, then I don't want to go down and start telling people.
Okay.
So
But
what
they
I
need to
don't
tell
want,
us now,
yeah.
not later.
What I don't want to get to, right, is for us to be like, okay, make this cut, right? And then we're hearing in the budget biennium of like, I didn't plan for this, and so I need more money because if I'm gonna be over the red, right? And I just do not want to get to that point where there was no actual planning, and now we're to the point where, you know, we have offices and departments in the red, and, you know, not saying that's going to happen, but, you know, if it's not assigned to a specific, I'm just scared that maybe they were like, well, I'll just bank on salary savings, right? And then all of a sudden it's like, they don't have any salary savings. And then it's gonna come back to us and we're gonna be, you know, basically held to the line of like, you know, either that or they're gonna be in the red. And
Well, here's the deal. The law allows for us to give a budget and the elected official, and maybe the department.
And the
director,
department directors.
They aren't held under that same standard.
Yes, they are.
And it's up to them to make it work with that dollar amount. If they go over budget, it comes out of their pocket personally. And I don't see anything wrong with that.
we can set that rule, right? But it's not what I've seen in the past as a
Well, no, in
trend.
the past, we've always bailed them out because we're micromanaging their budget right down to the FTE. I'm saying, don't do that.
You are responsible for doing that.
Well, I don't think we are responsible to go to the FTE.
I
I
will
just-
be happy to give you the laws that say that the Board of County Commissioners establishes positions and that officials, including elected, fill those positions with your consent.
Okay, well, that's fine, hiring freeze. We'll just leave it alone and do our, but we got more to come. We need to scrutinize all this. I'm not against scrutinizing everything and
Right.
making a determination, but I'm not against holding others accountable, if that's what it takes.
If you will. So with all due respect, every time an elected official has overspent in this county, the board has
But
bailed
that
them
doesn't mean we
out.
have to do everything the same way
That's
it's always
true.
been done. We
That
can make
is
some changes.
Absolutely true.
And I'm all for making changes. I mean, when Les Eldridge was a county commissioner, I used to have a lot of fun. I was sheriff, and I'm gonna do more with less. That was a little thing we had between us. And we made it work, you know? And the only time we didn't make it work was the one time Tom Fitzsimmons said, hey, if you come in and say you don't need this much for jail food today, you can come in July and say you need it, we'll give it to you. That was the only time. And then he said I was a dummy when I came in July, so we lost our relationship, you might say. So if you know the rules ahead of time going in, I think you can do it. And let's hold people accountable. What's wrong with that? Let's do her. Okay, where are we going? Somebody said you're
we're
doing
gonna-
a
yeah,
check.
We're gonna go ahead and take a lunch break, and then we will be back at 1:30 PM, and we will continue on.
Okay, thank you.